Hello, we're back for another Instagram Live. Today's episode is part of the Navigating the Holidays series, and we're going to be talking about setting boundaries, especially with family members. And we're going to be joined by Alba Soto, who is a trauma and resilience coach, and Betsy Perez. So I'm just going to wait for them both to join now. Hello.
Hello.
We made it. I need to turn my it was on silent. How are you?
I'm doing amazing, and
I don't know if the internet's not working.
frozen. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you now, yeah. It's probably because I can see you, I can hear you. So that's a good start.
I feel so good. I feel so good, and I'm so glad that we're having this conversation right now of all times, because the struggle of dealing with different family members is something that will not end as long as we continue to grow and heal and overcome. There'll still be triggers and there'll still be challenges. So navigating through that and really having the protocols in place and the tools and the coping skills is so essential. So I'm so glad to be here.
It's not, it doesn't end like you say. It's not like, 1 year, it's like, okay, this is how it is. It's like a constant working on it. So yeah, I think it's a really important conversation. And to be honest, I know we're having this conversation to help people, but it's also helping myself. So it's as much needed for me as it is for everybody else. So I can see you, Betsy, but I'm not sure if you've requested.
Hola, Hector. Yes, it is that time of year. It's very interesting because as we embark on this journey of being healers and healing ourselves, Hi, Betsy.
We made it.
We're here.
There's 3 of us.
No, you just continue because I'm just.
I was just quickly saying that as we embark on the journey of healing, not just healing ourselves, but even supporting others in their healing journey, there's this misconception that we have it all together. There's this misconception that we've overcome all of these challenges and that we too don't face triggers, challenges when it comes to family members and things like that. So I just want everybody to know that these challenges that are happening around this time, around grief, around, sexual trauma that resulted from family members or whatever it is, that we're all in this together. And we all experience these challenges. So I'm excited to have this conversation. And Betsy.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. I'm a little going through my own family stuff right now. So, right now my mother's in surgery as we speak. So, this is a very timely time to be having all of this. So I agree with Alba that it's really divine time, and I'm so excited to share with you all in this conversation.
Oh, so lovely to have. Oh, it's so nice with the Three of you, and yeah, I really love the introduction there. I think, Alba, it's really important for us to highlight that the things that we're speaking on, it's not like we're coming from a place of the end line of, you know, we're here now in this final version of us, and we don't still face these challenges. So I think it is important to remind people that, you know, it's very real, it's very current. It's, you know, the holidays are now. I was having a conversation the other day, and it was like, you know, we're doing this series on navigating the holidays, but it's, you know, it's a real life navigation. It's not, you know, it's really happening now. So I thought before we get into obviously the conversation, did you guys want to maybe introduce yourselves?
Yeah.
Who would like to go first?
I figure since Alba was, you know, she came and stuff, so, and then I'll go after.
My name is Alba, and I am a trauma liberation coach. I'm an author, and I also am an addictions nurse by day and a mother of 5. And I'm also a survivor of family sexual trauma, domestic violence, and rape. And as a result of those dark things that I experienced, including my father, who's a narcissist, and surviving narcissistic abuse in a relationship, I learned a thing or two, and I'm just here to shed light and share that wisdom that I learned in overcoming, so that others can also be unstuck and overcome through the dark times.
I'm Betsy Perez, and I love Alba and Sunita. I love these 2 women. So I want to open with that. Like, I love y'all, and I'm so happy to be in conversation with you 2 on and offline. These are real connections, right? For me, and I think for each other. So this is not just, you know, we talk, like we be talking, y'all. So I'm Betsy Perez, and I am someone who's experienced childhood sexual trauma in their childhood. And as I've grown into an adult, catching up with my adulting, I have dedicated a lot of my work around supporting other individuals who have experienced childhood sexual trauma to become sexually educated. I call you sexually educated adults that their inner child always needed, or inner children always needed, because I firmly believe that childhood sexual trauma is an energetic trauma. It is a physical trauma, an emotional, mental trauma, and of course it's a sexual trauma in and of itself, which encompasses all those other things. And I think that it's a child's trauma, it's a family trauma, it's a communal trauma, and then it becomes a global trauma. And so I'm very excited to really share some of the ways that I supported myself throughout, you know, the process of reparenting myself through this, especially through family functions and whatnot, because I think that there's also the misconception, along with how Alba was saying, that you kind of get it all together. Just because maybe you're sharing about it, or maybe you don't seem as perturbed or disturbed when you're within family, or you're within conversation or whatnot. There's some adults still want to stay connected to the family in which they became harmed in, or the communities in which they were harmed in. And that's also something that that sometimes feels taboo, and it's okay and it's all right. And I think that this is a great conversation of really looking at that part of ourselves. For some of us that may be on the cusp of, I want to stay connected to my family, but I don't know how to continue this process that I feel is valid and needs my attention. So I hope this conversation supports, you know, us in that, and whoever else sits in it.
Yeah, I'm really glad that we obviously, not that I forgot, it's not that I forgot, but it's obviously, we're navigating the holidays, it's triggering. But of course, like, if you've experienced something within your family context, or in my case, yeah, I have in my family context, but it's also like generational trauma. So that generational trauma that I'm, you know, it's like when you break away from that, from your family, that's when it's a time of change as well, and it's hard to navigate this like new version of yourself within that old family dynamic setup. So I'm really happy that we reminded people actually of that, how there are many survivors who will stay connected and who do experience it within their family, and they stay connected to the family, and there is no right or wrong way to deal with that. You know, it's not like you have to cut off your family, and it's not that, you know, it's a choice, isn't it? It's an individual choice that everybody has, and how they navigate it. So yeah, okay, I'm really excited to get into it. I thought we could start. I've got a quote. The quote is about boundaries, and it says, "Daring to set boundaries about having the courage to love ourselves, even when we risk disappointing others." And by Brené Brown. So I thought we could just start things off for some people who might not, might not even know what a boundary is, how we would go about even identifying what a boundary is. If anyone had any thoughts on that one.
Yeah, that's a lot. I think that's a beautiful quote, and I love Brene and how she really really talks about the vulnerability of sharing and having the courage to do that. And for me, the way I define boundaries is another quote as well, is the distance by which I can love you and me simultaneously. So I want people to take away the reality that boundaries is actually an act of love, an act of love for yourself, but also an act of love for that other person. Because if you don't set those boundaries, if you can't be, truly whole around that person, it does build up resentment. It does build up this hatred inside of you, and this shame around why couldn't I protect myself? Why couldn't I speak up for myself? Why couldn't I speak my truth in this particular instance? Why couldn't I set that boundary and say, at this point, you have to leave, right? Because at this point, you're no longer, this is no longer a safe space for me, right? So understanding that boundaries is actually an act of love is what I would say the initial way to look at boundaries. It's the way I love myself, and it's the way I choose to love you, even if it's at a distance at this moment.
Yeah, I really love that. Loving at a distance, it doesn't mean it's not a case of it's like you say, it's loving from both sides from a distance. You need that distance though sometimes. I love you from over here.
Okay. I love both those quotes. Those are really amazing quotes. When I think about boundaries, a lot of my framing around this, in particular when it comes to family, is around reparenting and understanding for me that I now have an inner child to tend to and to care for, and that is possibly in pain or still healing from that pain, and may have their guards up, right? May have their own necessities that the adult self of mine may not have. So when I think about when I think about those boundaries, I think of one, right? When you realize that you have an inner child that is still wounded, right? Who is living with those sexual wounds still, and you are now as an adult tasked with, and honored with the task to tend to these wounds. I always say that your parents or other adults may not agree with the way that you're reparenting your inner child, right? Which is going back to those boundaries. And I think that for me, one of the things that definitely helped, and abating and having boundaries around family functions has been something I've been dealing with since 13, because I was in foster care. So I was kind of gauging, how long did I want to stay with my parents? How long did I not? And all of these things before I felt like I was on freeze mode or panicked, before I even understood that these were trauma responses per se. So for me, I really had to sit down and really understand where I was at and understanding how are my boundaries for myself first, being like, what are the boundaries for myself before I go into the family experience, right? The family event, because oftentimes I wanted to create a boundary for a family member. However, I didn't necessarily understand how to enforce that boundary or what exactly the boundary was, because I wasn't exactly understanding how they were impacting me. I just knew that something was off when they were there or when I would go there, when there's like too many people and it was so and so. I was still kind of murky in that space of boundaries. So for me, it was really about understanding, like, well, having to sit down and observe what happens, right? What are the warning signs for me that one, I need a boundary, because sometimes what is the indicator that you even need the boundary all of a sudden, so that you know what's setting it off. Like, that was really one of the huge things for me to even understand at first, that I needed a boundary, because I began feeling the resentments, I began feeling the sick, or I began feeling agitated. I was numbing out. I was disassociating. I was raging out and being nasty and snappy to people, and it was out of place. So, before I understood what exactly I needed to coexist in a space that I wanted to coexist in, even though I knew that it was subject to some bullshit, but I wanted to be there, I needed to understand, well, what is really the boundary here, and actually know what is like my exit strategy. What is the exit strategy? So that, and also, what am I doing throughout the day to protect my boundaries, so that I already have the muscle built to enforce a boundary, because sometimes you want to do it and it's not what you do on the everyday. So that's what I thought, what's coming to me about boundaries right now.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, and I think no, it's good. It's good. It's like you were like mentioning all the points that I've been thinking about earlier, actually, with boundaries. I guess for me, it's only recently, like the last 2 or 3 years, and since I started therapy, I realized, understood what a boundary was. I was in like survival mode up until around 30, so I'd lived like a fair few decades living this way, and giving such a giving person, giving all my energy to my family, because I felt like my family, like I was saying, my trauma is connected to generational trauma. So I would carry this weight of not just what's happened to me, but carry the weight of what I'm feeling from like from my family as well. So I carried that for a long time, and then when I went to therapy, it was I had a similar to you. I started with feeling different in scenarios, like being with lots of family, being at big events, getting really like feeling really angry, because obviously I was clearing out all of these emotions that I'd suppressed and trapped down for so long. So when I started going to therapy and then going back to, I didn't live near my family, go and visit my family. So I go back to visit my family, I was getting really like snappy or angry at things that, it's not, for them it would have seemed strange, because this person that I would never have reacted that way before, but all of a sudden I'm getting super like emotional, or I'm listening to what they're saying and taking it in a different way. I'm not laughing. I like to laugh, I joke around a lot, but I'm not laughing. I'm like upset. So I think that's, for me, in the last 2 or 3 years, that's where I understood what having a boundary was. And I guess going back to what you were saying, Alba, it is having that loving from a distance. It's not that I don't love my family. I just want to put that out there with this whole conversation. It's not that we don't. It's not that I don't love. There's plenty of love there, but it's knowing to give your energy and to give your energy to yourself, right? I'd end up going to bed at night and just feeling drained from having to play this role within a family that was just tiring. I just couldn't keep playing that strong character, or that one that's there for everybody, that comedian, that that person who was wearing a mask for many years, and that again was part of my survival. So I think you kind of covered it there, actually. But I'm just going to say, how can we and we've just talked about it a little bit there, what a boundary is, but how can we identify what a boundary is? And I guess that is just tuning into, I don't know, what do you guys think? Like, how can we actually know if there's a situation when we need to set a boundary? Is it like listening to our triggers? Is it, does anyone have any thoughts on that?
I can start first. So it really comes with really connecting with your body and knowing that your voice is worthy of taking space, right? So I noticed even recently in navigating through a toxic friendship that when this person says something that is hurtful, I don't defend myself. I don't defend my children. And as a result, I walk out of there feeling violated, feeling uncomfortable. So even if in the moment you're not able to speak your truth and connect with your body in a way that you're able to like make noise and hold space for that. And I do want to say thank you to Betsy because she's been working with me a lot on this, to be able to just say what makes me uncomfortable at any given point and say what my needs are, right? And say, you're not meeting my needs, or you're exceeding my limits, and like, this is not what I desire, or whatever it may be. So even if in the moment you're not able to be honest with yourself, right? Make noise, speak what it is that you need, desire, or not. And sometimes it could be, I'm sorry, but you gotta go. Like, your time is up because I no longer, like, this is no longer a safe space for me. And this comes with sometimes ending a relationship or just ending an experience, right? This is a boundary to say, this experience has expired as a result of I'm no longer feeling safe. This relationship has expired because I'm no longer feeling safe. Right? So it's connecting with our bodies. It's allowing ourselves to make that noise that expresses what our needs are and what our discomforts are, what offends us, what hurts us, in a truly authentic way, unapologetic, in the moment that you experience it. Because I was always one that was like, you know what, let me process this first, and then later on I'll come back to it if I'm still feeling emotional about it, right? Because maybe it's not this person, maybe it's me. I'm the problem, right? Because I'm the one that's getting emotional in this moment, right? So to be able to make noise and connect with our bodies, I would say, are definitely the cues to say this is a challenge. And in that moment, I was able to look at it in retrospect. So I was offended. I did not set a boundary. I did not defend myself or my children. But afterwards, I had to ask myself, why did you not say something? And when was the last time you spoke up for yourself with this person? And if this person is not a safe person that you feel comfortable setting boundaries with, then is this person a healthy person for you to be engaging with? And then I had to set the boundary after the fact and say, you know what, this is no longer a safe space for me. So when you set the boundary, doesn't matter, right? But at some point you have to self-reflect and be like, wait a minute, this isn't safe. Let me speak up now. Let me make noise now.
I guess that comes from practice, right? Like what you're explaining. I'm sure there's plenty of people, myself included, that have been in this situation, and it's going to take time to get that assertiveness when you're not used to speaking your truth, like you say. So I think for a lot of people starting to set boundaries, even if it is after, even if you can have an experience where you felt like you were saying, you're not holding a safe container for this conversation or where this is going. I think reflecting on it after and then communicating it effectively with that person who was pushing that boundary after is still a good point of like starting to set boundaries, because it's difficult. It is hard when you're not used to saying how you're feeling, or Yeah.
Um, I totally am sitting and Adrian, and sitting and resonating with what you're saying, Alba. And right, and you depicted something so beautiful. Boundaries are something that we're amending consistently, right? A boundary is something that is that can be, it can be a hard boundary. And I think that as time continues to wear on, because I find that boundaries are also something that allows us to experience more pleasure, if we can reframe it in that way. It is a space where it allows you to know where it's not going to go, and where it's not going. You create this container, right? This very you erect this container based on your words, contracts, whatever you want to call them, and then you have this space where now you can be whole and in your body as much as possible. And if we can allow ourselves to understand that that boundary is an opportunity for more pleasure, for a more pleasurable experience in our bodies, then that can, I think that that also is a way of thinking about them, because sometimes we think as boundaries as this very like can have sometimes of about a bittersweet kind of a sour connotation to it, and it's like something that is hard and something that is this, right? But so many beautiful experiences where we've had boundaries and then they have shifted, where maybe we want to expand the limits a little bit more. As much as we're talking about like our families and the conflicts, right? Also, like, as how beautiful it is to set those very hard boundaries, maybe for like 2 years with the holidays or whatever the fuck, all of a sudden, excuse me, all of a sudden you set 2 hours, to go to that family function, and you feel like you have more space, and you feel like the boundaries have expanded a bit more. And I think that that's also a beautiful point of inquiry as well, when you do go from that family member or that friend, where there was that tension and that conflict and you had to set that boundary, to when that is respected, right? That heat, that warmth is given to it. And little by little, that boundary continues to be melted, right? Because it is an armor of sorts. And it continues to melt with the respect and the acknowledgement, right, from both parties. And then that heat and that warmth begins to allow for more space, for more breathing area, for more room area on both ends, even if it's a little tricky, right? And that's like a space of exploration, and that's the space of curiosity. I also want to honor boundaries in that they can be as soft as we want them to be within the right circumstances, right? Like, we're not just going to be soft and loosey goosey about our shit just because even when you feel like there's like the limits are being expanded, that also is a point of inquiry. It doesn't mean abandon the protocol and don't leave at 8 p.m. Leave at 8 p.m. and reflect on, wow, maybe next time I can stay till 8:30, right? And stretch that boundary as much as you want, little by little, and bring that other person into when you also want to open the boundary, because sometimes, family members and friends, they are not aware of our boundary, so they can't always meet us where we're at. So we're setting the boundary in the front porch, but we never said shit about the back porch. So then they're like, oh, well, I'll just come and knock through the back. Yeah. It's all good, bro. The back door was open. Olvídate, come. I'm coming in. And it's like, fuck. So it's like also bringing in that individual as when it stretches, because also I have found that family members are a little bit turned off too after years. And I've had this experience even with my sister. I went for a hug this year, and she was like, whoa, like, you're hugging me, you want to be affectionate, right? And I had to understand that she had respected this boundary for years now. And now she's like, bitch, you're hugging me. Like, that boundary is no longer there. So also, what does that conversation look like when the boundaries do stretch a bit as well?
Boundaries on the both sides then, isn't it? 'Cause she's obviously learned that one way of handling the relationship, and then but the boundaries do change. And there was something you said, all of that I really resonated with, actually. Yeah, it gets what you were saying. I think you said a boundary is like a muscle. It takes practice. So, first year that you set that boundary around the holidays, I think about 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, it was actually really hard for me to. I did still go home for Christmas and stay for like. I shut down the amount of time that I was staying. I was like, right, I'm just going for 2 days. I literally went for Christmas Eve and then came back Boxing Day. And then last year, because of COVID, I spent Christmas alone. And this year, because of COVID again, but I'd already said that I wasn't going to go back for the holidays, just because I'm just watching my energy, and it's tiring. If you work all year round, there's other times of the year I feel like you have to go and connect with family at the holidays. That's another thing that you have to be with your family around the holidays. But it doesn't have to be your family at a time, especially it's not a natural. If you come away from it drained, right, and holiday from work or whatever you're doing, then I don't know, you feel a bit depleted. So I think effectively communicating what the boundaries are changing and reminding family members the same, because setting a boundary 1 year, or one time round, people are going to forget. If you've been acting a different way for like 2 decades, however long, in a different role in that family dynamic, it's easy for the other person to forget sometimes. It might not be the case that they're disrespecting that boundary, but then it's just the case of us needing to remind them of what that boundary was that we've set. So starting communicating it with kindness and compassion, like we're saying, but then when it gets to it, when you do need to be more assertive, you have to become a bit more assertive, because it's not easy for them to remember. I think remember what the boundary is and when your boundaries change. So
Yeah. I mean, and as a Dominican person, that wasn't. There's the idea of tú no te gobierna, right? You don't govern yourself. And there's this and that's the literal translation. You don't govern yourself. And so when you get older and you have not really disrupted this idea, and you kind of, sometimes it's easy to go back to family and like feeling like home, and you start kind of, sometimes you get a little bit more coddled and things like that. But you're also you're also addressing this within yourself, which may not be outside of your family. It may not be out in the open. Maybe you're just dealing with this on your own right now. So you have to set kind of more of those silent boundaries. And it's like, all right, maybe just for me, I'm just gonna set this boundary. It's I can understand how culturally, right? Understanding culturally how children are viewed culturally in your and in your culture, because that's really going to inform also the way that you choose to address your childhood traumas in adulthood. So I always think of like the boundaries and cultural boundaries that really kind of put me up, and I have to then like say to myself sometimes, like, I am adult Betsy, I am 31 years old, and I am whatever age I am. So
oh, I think it's frozen. I can see you, Alba.
Yes, yes, yes. And
Maybe it's just you.
yeah, I think she's probably just getting a call. She'll be back in a second. So one of the things that I wanted to also mention is, with it being the end of the year and the beginning of a new season, right? It's also so important for us to protect that time, because oftentimes it's an opportunity to reflect. It's an opportunity to refine. It's an opportunity to set our goals and our intentions for the next year. And how difficult is it for us to truly come from an integral space, a whole space, if we're battling with this, these relations and these connections and these traumas and these triggers, while trying to set our intentions and our goals for the following year. So if it ever feels like it's too much. Saying it's okay to stay home for this one. It's okay to, you know, have something else going on that doesn't include going to this particular party or going to this particular gathering, because it will help us to be able to continue to have that integrity and that home as we're preparing for our intentions and our goals for the following year. So I just think that it's very interesting and tricky how the holidays ends up being at the end of December, and we're going into this new year, and we're expected to deal with a lot of triggers and challenges while trying to recalibrate ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes I can't do both. Sometimes I just don't have the capacity.
And I was going to say for you as well, obviously you have your children. So I'm not, you know, created my own family yet. It is something that I want to do. But you know, there must come a point where your family, you know, trauma or triggers from the past, and then you're wanting to also create this space, right, for the family that you've created. So I feel like learning boundaries is, you know, holding space, like you were saying, with your friend, and protecting your children in those dynamics. It's even, you know, there's boundaries from both sides. I don't know if I'm making any sense. Yeah. Oh, you need to go. It was so lovely to speak to you.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Oh, so it's just us?
I think she's ready to go now, but we've covered quite a bit of boundaries there. I mean, the two of us, you again, Betsy. What else can we talk about boundaries then? We talked a little bit about how to communicate the boundaries, right? So, you know, I think communicate from a place of like love and compassion. But as sometimes you do need to tell them as it is again. You know, the point of being nicey nice. Yeah. But then when that boundary is getting crossed, there has to come a point where, you know, we have to lay it down again.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to say, so then I'm so awkward because I got the call from my dad and I'm just like, so we closed out the conversation?
Yeah, well, no, I think, no, we didn't. I think Alba just had to go. So we wrap it up because the time has actually gone quite quickly.
Yes, it did. I just wanted to add, that it's not, like approaching it from a harm reduction, like approaching our families and the holidays from a space of a harm reduction perspective, where there's gonna be, it may be painful, and there may be somebody or something that will cause you some kind of harm. No, like especially depending like where you are in whatever layer of your journey, because you probably have healed several layers and several aspects of this, and then something maybe have came up anew, which is so normal, right? And I think that sometimes disillusioning ourselves and saying like this is gonna be the one that I'm gonna be good and whatnot. It's sometimes it can, granted intention, right? And also I think having a healthy caution at first sometimes is healthy, and knowing, just having a harm reduction approach to it, and knowing that you may experience some harm. It's a matter of how are you setting yourself to reduce it so it's not as painful. Experience is not as painful for you, even if you want to go ahead and visit family and friends or whoever that in the holiday season. So that's a huge approach that I use. It's like, it may be painful, but what am I doing to reduce the pain and to process that?
Yeah, I think that's a nice way to kind of wrap it up and then just look at it in the sense of everything that we're talking about, the holidays. I think because of everything, there is like family, the holiday, family. Everybody's always talking about going to their family or spending that time, but if you can find a way, and some people might not be able to find that way, they might not be able to set that boundary. A family member might not be listening when you're communicating, trying to communicate that boundary. So everything that we're talking about, like you said, is to protect your inner peace protect
Yeah.
your personal space, hold that peaceful place, right? And like you said, you can set time limits. You can set time limits on events that you go to. That I found that really helpful, just going just for a day rather than staying night. So I think setting time limits on these things, and as I've been doing it the last 2 years, I feel like it's getting easier because my family is getting a bit more used to it. Bye, I'm going now.
That's beautiful. Well, Sunita, this was amazing. Thank you for always, gathering us together. You are such a sage. And like for that, God bless you, Mom. Like you're so dope. And I love Shushbox and all of the girls up in all the Shushboxes.
Bless you, and I'm really happy we got to connect. And yeah, we'll definitely be speaking again soon. And I hope you do have whatever you end up doing, in the holiday season, get some rest.
You too.
And yeah, we'll speak again.
We'll talk soon. Mwah. Later, everybody.